So welcome everyone, welcome to Healing Beauty. This is the place to empower your feminine heart in life, in business and in love. And today we have a very special speaker, Akara Sophia, who is going to be talking to us about sexual healing and the Priestess path. For those that don't know me, my name is Kelly Morgan. I have put this symposium together and it's been my real pleasure and honor to do that. I'm an activator of the divine feminine and I work within the womb field, the throne, the place where our divine feminine is fully embodied. It's almost her temple space. And when this space is clear, we're able to commune very clearly with that divine feminine aspect of self and able then to birth whatever it is that is to be birthed through us, so our divine purpose. And I'm going to just start by opening up before we hear from Akara. So I'm going to invite you to close your eyes and just taking some breaths, your own rhythm, in through your nose and out through your mouth. And just really inviting your energy to arrive into your body now. Just calling your awareness back into the body, back home. And just noticing which parts of your body are touching the chair beneath you and which parts aren't. And just really inviting the body to relax into this present moment, leaning back in the chair, giving your weight to the chair behind you so that you may sink more into your divine feminine essence. And I'm inviting you into the circle now, whether you're watching live or watching the replay, wherever you are in the world, inviting you into this beautiful vortex that we are creating together. Connecting our hearts, our wombs, together with the earth womb, the cosmic womb, as we arrive all together here today. And I just want to take a moment to send a prayer, to send love to Akara. For those that know her well, she's just recovering from surgery. It's gone okay. So this session was pre-recorded, but just really sending her gratitude, love and blessings now. Just coming back to the physical edges of your body. Starting to wiggle your fingers and your toes. And just opening your eyes when you're ready. So welcome everyone. As I said, this was pre-recorded, so I'm going to get it uploaded now and I can't wait to share it with you all. And at the end, I'm going to be opening it up for questions. Those questions are going to be fed to Akara, so please participate, ask questions, and we will begin. So welcome everyone, welcome to Healing Beauty Symposium. This is the place to heal your feminine heart, to empower yourselves in life, love and business. And it is my honor today to welcome Akara Sophia. Hello, Akara.
Hi, Kelly. I'm so happy to be here.
Akara is going to share with us such wisdom today on sexual healing and the Priestess path. And what an expert to hear from. She is a tantric wisdom teacher who illuminates the intersection between the lost mystery traditions of the ancient world and the living gnosis that is awakening inside of us each now. She is a guardian of Akashic knowledge, and she is particularly devoted to the ancestral wisdom regarding the path of Priestess and the teaching of practical tantric devotion for health, wealth, healing, and the path of love and spiritual awakening. She has created many courses. A really popular one is the Magdalene Wounds, and also a mystical wealth and leadership training academy, the Sacred Wealth Academy. I have personally been involved in a few of Akara's courses, some of Sacred Wealth and Hathor Rising, and they've been life-changing for me. So I was really honored when she agreed to come and talk at this symposium. She is really devoted to the integration of sacred wealth, sacred sexuality, and sacred relationship in the birth of a new humanity. And you can find out more about her on her website, wakingbeauty.com, and I will share all the links, and she also has a gift. Mm-hmm. So hi, Kara, you're here today to talk about sexual healing and the Priestess path.
Yes, yes. Well, I'm so happy to be here. And before we get into that topic, there is one thing that I would like to clarify. I study both tantra, and on more of like a soul level, I feel very connected to the goddess temple traditions that once existed in the Western world. Tantra is obviously a tradition that comes from the East. It's a very different lineage, and in some ways it has crossovers, obviously, with the path of the goddess or the priestess path. But it is, I just want to honor the difference. So oftentimes when I'm talking more about the priestess path, I use the word temple instead of tantra, even though I also do study tantra. I study Tibetan Buddhist tantra. So I kind of have a foot in both worlds, but I think it's important for us to make that distinction. So I just wanted to say that before we begin.
Oh, thank you. Mm-hmm. So can you tell us a little bit about your story and how sexual healing drew you to the Priestess path?
Yeah. And I think this is such an important topic that I've seen in so many women, and with the awakening of the more divine feminine energies that are and have been coming to the forefront of collective consciousness. They've been awakening in the last 50, possibly even 100 years, but I think certainly the last 50 years. So, my story is that, I was a sexual abuse survivor as a child. And I went through also a very difficult period of, coming into my sexuality at 12 to 13. There were definitely challenges there. I did not have, so many of us learn about sexuality from, TV and from the internet and from other kids at school. And it's not necessarily like a deep initiation into the sacredness of our bodies and of the wisdom of our life force energy, which is what our sexuality really truly is. And as a result of obviously some of the trauma in my childhood, and then not having a good framework of, initiation into my womanhood, I was, drawn into toxic relationships, and, went to a college that ended up having like a very heavy rape culture there, and was just deeply, deeply disempowered in this part of myself in a very self-destructive way. And so not everybody has experienced, you know, abuse, and you don't need to have experienced that. I think just what I want to say is it was such a significant pain point for me. And I, even after I got on the spiritual path, and from the very beginning, you know, I had, I guess you could say the path of the goddess was calling me. When I first got, you know, when I was first recovering from my self-destructive period of adolescence and youth, I was very drawn to Christianity, and you know, like Mary Magdalene was there, but I was just like, you know, oh, I don't know if I can open that door. And I was having a lot of mystical experiences with Christ that were more, it's not that they were overtly sexual, but I would just say that it was like the romantic sexual energy was fueling the relationship with this divine presence, and bringing about mystical states that I actually didn't understand at that time. I didn't understand what they were. And then because I kept repressing the calling that was really there, which is what I now know was the calling of the goddess. I did end up developing a uterine health issue. So I had uterine fibroids. They were very large and very fast growing ones that came about in my 20s. And so for me, the manifestation of the physical disease made it necessary, in essence, for me to surrender and for me to start to explore, first and foremost, womb healing, how to heal my womb. And from there, it really opened a door into what I realized over time, and through a lot of trauma healing and through a lot of self-care and learning new practices around how to honor my body, my menstruation, my sexuality. What really truly became a realization that I was connecting to a forgotten, like a very lost and a very forgotten wisdom tradition, which the closest way that I could describe it would be the wisdom of a fertility goddess, or goddess of love and beauty and sexuality and fertility. And, as that happened for me, it was like, finding your, like the most precious thing in the world. It's like finding what's truly always been in your heart and been inside me all along. And, what I would say in relation to the topic, sexual healing and the priestess path, is that I have seen other sisters, other teachers of the divine feminine, other women that have this calling also on a soul level to the path of the fertility goddess and path of love and these lost temple traditions. And so I'm really speaking of, at one point, and it was a long, long time ago on our planet, but at one point, there was almost like, I almost kind of call it like a woman's religion. And in many points in history, it was kind of underground. It's like maybe the society would be doing like, Christianity, or maybe they would be doing, something more devoted to monotheism, like the Jewish people would be worshiping Yahweh, but like the Jewish women would be in the homes with like the little statues to Asherah. And it was kind of like a quiet little devotion for women to, make it through, marriage and childbirth and conceiving children and caring for the home and the domestic goddesses like Hera and all of these, at some points there would be temples. And the further you go back in time in our history, the more these fertility goddess temples actually had a place in society. And at one point they were quite powerful. And then if you go back even further in time, like into our Paleolithic era, you kind of see like that was what God was a big juicy mama statue representing the fertility of the earth, representing the beauty of nature. And so, my own disease and my own kind of pain and struggle that I went through, really living in a society that it's not so much like, oh yes, we have industrialization, we have, problems in our relationship to our bodies, there's a lot of addiction, there's a lot of sexual violence, all of these different things. But on an even deeper level, it's just the wound of growing up in a world where the goddess wasn't there for me, where she just wasn't manifested anywhere. And so for me, it was a really beautiful and a very deeply mystical journey of coming back to myself and coming back to like a really important part of what I also believe is a really important part of humanity. And I've seen, many other women, and especially those that have even more of a kind of a calling to even like serve the goddess of love or to serve the goddesses of fertility. Oftentimes they experience the worst sort of trials, either surrounding motherhood, childbirth, fertility, feminine health issues, or love, sex, and relationships. And so I'm kind of like putting the call out like, hey, if this is going on, it is a calling for all of us together to step into the wisdom of the feminine divine and to really start to remember and I think like bring forward for our daughters and for future generations this type of wisdom again.
I absolutely love what you said there, especially through that wounding and that healing, that you kind of had this homecoming to these lost mystery goddess traditions. And what I'm hearing is that that was a gnosis, a feeling for yourself rather than a learned experience from the external. And this is available to women if they consciously start to work on this path.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, partly why I was drawn to Tantra is because after I started having the inner experience, and basically the only sources you can sort of find this information in the Western world are usually channeled. So it's usually channel teachings where, I was reading like books. When I finally broke through my Christian programming, was like, I really want to discover Mary Magdalene. I think I read like a series of channeled books that usually women had done on who Mary Magdalene really was as sort of more the feminine counterpart to the Christ consciousness. And that was really lovely. And yet, there was like a part of me that's like, okay, like what has to be preserved somewhere on our planet. There has to be a goddess tradition preserved somewhere. And that is when I got more drawn to the Tantra in the East and the Eastern teachings, because a lot of Tantra not all of it, but a lot of tantra is based more in Shakti or in goddess worship and goddess devotion. And so again, but even in the East, tantra is a more it's not mainstream, you know, it's not a mainstream path, but there are kind of unbroken lineages and teachings. So I just like to distinguish the two, because from what my experience is that the fertility goddess temple tradition is even like different than tantra. You know, one of the things I like to say is like tantra is very deeply devoted in some ways to liberation. Like there's a lot more emphasis on some of the more destructive deities like Kali and Shiva to kind of like awaken you super fast. And temple and the goddess temple traditions were, in some ways, they were not really so focused on liberation or transcendence from the creation. They were actually really devoted to maintaining the life in the creation in a harmonious way. I mean, women would go to the temples to conceive children. They would go to find their marital partner. You know, there's this aspect of more of the Divine Mother, where in opposed to the Divine Father, you know, she is literally the space that is holding all beings at all different levels, consciousness, through their experiences of life. And so you can go to the mother, not necessarily for the realization of perfection, but to be held in your struggles that you're going through in your life, and to be nurtured through them, to find the grace, to walk your human experience. And you know, there is a level of that too. I mean, the essence of, you know, if I was to describe like the pure Divine Mother's essence, is like that compassion of you know, meeting the needs of life as they arise, which is kind of the nature of the divine feminine. It also has like a secret component to it, which is revealing the way, the truth, the light, the one reality, the divine beloved, the, you know, whatever we want to call that more transcendent, unifying wisdom that underlies the creation. She has that in her. It's just that she sort of brings us there through our humanity and through learning how to, you know, live here in our bodies and on this planet and in our family systems, in our societies, and to almost like beautify and sanctify that human experience, so that it becomes clearer how the divine, how that transcendent reality is manifest through the creation. And so if we look at like where we're at right now as a species, you know, we've had all these, you know, transcendent wisdom paths, whether, you know, you know, especially Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. So especially what I call the Abrahamic faiths. So very much like, hey, let's get somewhere, let's get to this, you know, higher state, and a lot of, you know, renunciation and very strict disciplines of body and mind and spirit in order to achieve that. And yet, at the physical plane and at the level of society and at the level of our diet and at the level of, you know, just like how we're living day to day, it's almost been like in absence, because we've been just kind of ignoring the creation and just saying, hey, this is not sacred, this is not holy, only this is. you know, there's now a lot of obscuration, there's a lot of obstacles, there's a lot of, you know, chaos, you know, really and truly manifesting at the creative plane. And that chaos is, you know, likely going to be, you know, a crucible that could become, you know, planetary wide in terms of like environmental crises and even political crises, and like we just went through with the pandemic and health crises. And so I really feel that, you know, that wisdom of the goddess is coming through, and it's speaking through women's bodies. It's speaking through our physical sufferings. It's speaking through a lot of levels of the dysfunction that we might be experiencing in love or relationships or in, you know, growing families. And it's a calling for us to collectively, really and truly start to honor, you know, the feminine principle and the creation and our own humanity. And so even though it's not necessarily maybe as like, how to describe it, like focused on, you know, the one kind of like focused on perfection or focused on realization, I say that it inadvertently almost makes it much easier for us to realize those states that have been taught in all of the world religions, you know, in these last ages of time.
Beautiful. So is there any specific wisdom of the goddess, especially the love and fertility goddess, that can really support us in those trials that you're talking about that we're facing now as a species?
Yeah. Well, so obviously, like depending on what our specific form of suffering is or health issue is, there's always going to be different protocols or different practices or different graces that, you know, will need to be applied in essence to different situations. And I think that's one thing that's kind of lovely about the goddess herself. You know, in the Eastern tradition, a lot of these goddesses are shown with like a lot of different arms and faces. Even in the Western tradition, the triple-faced goddess, and that sort of represents that like there is this uniqueness and specificity to all the different beings and all the different needs that are in the creation. And so I can't speak to like it's going to be different depending on what your struggle is, but what I can say is that the overall, when we're connecting to the fertility goddess, and usually it wasn't just fertility, it was usually like love and fertility. And so when we're connecting to her energy, I think one of the biggest keys that is some like almost like a medicine that can be really applied across the board is to honor, you know, sexuality itself as the gateway to life. You know, all of us come into this world and come into a physical body through sex. And so it is the source of life. And we know that when it is in its most exalted state, that act is an act of love. You know, it is an act of love. So all of us are born of love. And so when we begin to kind of re-see the creation as like the actual energy underlying the creation is love. It's in everything, and it is the nature of this world. It is the nature of the plants and the trees, the air, like everything is love. And making that commitment to see our sexuality and our lives themselves our bodies themselves, like this is sacred. And I think that's where it begins. No matter no matter what your struggle is, no matter what the suffering is, it's like you begin there and adopting that worldview, because in a lot of ways, we're taught the exact opposite. Isn't that wild?
Yeah.
That we're taught the exact opposite in so many different religions and in so many different paradigms that are oftentimes like very subconscious. But certainly, like in the Judeo-Christian paradigm, there is a lot of shame, and there is a lot of, even in some of the Eastern faiths, there's a lot of this focus on transcending the body and transcending the creation. And creation is Maya, and creation is this great horror of illusion, which in essence she is in some ways. And that's where some of like the Magdalene mysteries come in, like the sacred horror, the sacred illusion, the sacred mystery. And that's why, when I did kind of go into Tantra, it was more to find methods and teachings that really revealed God in essence, like in union and through the creation and through the created experience of life. But it begins with that commitment. It begins with that commitment to love, that commitment to, realizing the nature of creation as love, and to realizing yourself as an embodiment of love and compassion to others, and really just honoring creation, the body, all the different life forms in the creation, all the different bodies, all the different colors, all the different races, all the different manifestations, honoring them all as sacred. And I would also say, like, there's a specificity, like there's like, the more you kind of go into the goddess traditions, you start to sort of understand the specific sacrednesses of all the different forms and all the different elements and all the different manifestations. And so it becomes this like fractal of, your summit is called healing. It's called Healing Beauty. It's like this fractal of all this beauty awakening, and how much more wonderful would life be if we were all attuned to that,
Oh yeah, I really love that.
Yeah.
What specific karmic wounds do priestesses of the fertility goddess carry?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think, like, as part of my own journey with kind of grappling with my own karma that manifested when I came in, and it was actually like really necessary for me to begin to dismantle some of my experiences before I was born. And that was something that it was, I think when you go through a sexual abuse experience in early childhood, where you're like, hey, like I didn't like really create this, like I didn't like consciously choose this. Like, why did this happen? It was almost like it was creating an obstacle in my faith. It was creating an obstacle in my trust in life, or my trust in God, whatever you want to call it. And so this was sort of the portal into a lot of the work that I do in the Akashic records. And for those of you that don't know about the Akashic records is in essence a healing modality that is a spiritually based healing modality that treats our karmic history a lot of times from the past, a lot of times from past lives, not all the time, but often, going into the past. And so you can heal individually your karma from past lives, and you can also go into the Akashic records to sort of retrieve wisdom from creation that might have been lost at the physical plane level, where, you know, a lineage fell and the library and all the texts were burned. But if you tap into the Akashic, you can get the essence of that wisdom, you can get the essence of those teachings, you can bring that through. So Akashic records came to me in a very kind of spontaneous way. I was grappling, obviously, with my sexual abuse trauma. It was creating an obstacle in my faith. And I had heard about Akashic records, and I thought, well, maybe I should go to see this woman that does these readings. Maybe there's something that I don't remember from my past that can help me have more peace with this event that I experienced. But because of the nature of the event, it had such a massive trust wound inherent in it that I was like, you know what, I'm just not going to be able to trust a channel. And I had this thought, I was like, if there's something I need to know, I was like, it needs to just come directly to me. And then I just forgot that I made that decision. Basically, I was like, no, I'm not going to go. This is important enough that it needs to be a direct revelation. And then I forgot. And a few months later, I went on a retreat at a Franciscan monastery. And it was like a fully silent retreat. It was a really beautiful place. And I ended up in a dream, reliving a very specific past life. So I'm saying this because we're talking about the karmic wounds of the priestess path. And I want to explain, you know, how I became interested in karma and in the past and how it is affecting us in the future or in the present. And so, you know, that experience gave me such a deep sense of peace and understanding, and also where I was really able to see life, the life and death cycle, and really like the cosmos and how it's structured in that way as actually being perfect, which a lot of us can't see that. We, you know, we are like, life is so unfair. Why is this happening? And all these different things. And so for me, also that devotion to the Akashic records has become a wisdom path, a way of seeing the divinity of creation or the divinity of life itself. So I'm saying that, and now I'm going to kind of shift into the priestess wound. So again, if you can imagine that at one point here on this planet, there were great temples to the goddess. And at one point, this was the foundation of how we related to the sacred. We related to the sacred and the creator as a mother goddess. And in the course of kind of like moving from the age of Taurus into the age of Aries, that was about, you know, 4,000 years ago to up to the time of Christ. So the 2,000 years before Christ was this age of Aries where monotheism rose during that time. And we see this shift into these male deities and masculine ideas of God. And, you know, evolutionarily speaking, that's because a lot of the way in which human beings were living on the planet was less dependent on nature and started to be more dependent on these empires and these kings and these kingdoms. And that became more like your source of protection and provision is like the health of the king, the health of the kingdom. And we see this rise of monotheistic faiths and masculine deities take place during that time. And there was a lot of trauma that went on in that transition with the goddess temples that were here before. And certain, I call them the Magdalene wounds. And it is the shaming of the divine feminine, the demonizing of the divine feminine, and then ultimately the persecution and the casting out of the goddess from our fate, from our collective culture. You know, the goddess was canceled, and it kind of painfully so, painfully so. And so these Magdalene wounds are really truly like the archetypical karmic wounds that the divine feminine in essence has to kind of break through to come into our awareness. But then if you were a priestess in one of these goddess temples, or that really was an experience that you personally were the focal point of that and went through it yourself, then you might have them in a more pronounced way. So you might have like a more pronounced fear of persecution for connecting to the goddess or connecting to your sexuality, or you might have you know, trauma of you know, rape, or trauma of something something violent that has almost like disconnected you from that divine mother. And that could be playing out anytime you sort of try to reconnect to your deep feminine essence. And also too, you know, like there was at certain timelines and in certain temples, there was things like sacred prostitution that went on in the temples of Aphrodite, that went on in the temples of Inanna. And when we look at, you know, especially the Jewish faith, if you're a big reader of the Old Testament, which a lot of us, you know, are, because if you're either Jewish or Christian, you probably read that book or had it read to you. And the Jewish people in particular had sort of a war with a lot of the fertility goddess cults in that ancient Near East area. And so in part, that's because at that time, these fertility goddess temples were usually more associated with like the Sumerian and the Babylonian, the Egyptian empires. And the Jews were obviously being persecuted by these empires. And so the representation of the goddess became almost like that whore of Babylon, or that Jezebel, or that kind of like ultimate evil. And a lot of this affects us just subconsciously when we try to reconnect to this like sacred sexuality, when we try to reconnect to you know, honoring the creation as sacred, honoring our bodies as sacred. And so if you have any like hypervigilance, like hyper fears about, you know, feeling like, oh, I'm like shameful, or I'm a prostitute, or I'm like a great whore. Like I pretty much, to get into the true essence of this goddess of love and fertility, just had to go through like all of that, be like just purging and purging and purging until I could just get to the mana in the center. And so a lot of us have to do that. And sometimes we will outpicture it karmically, like maybe in events in your childhood or your adolescence, or even throughout your life. And so, you know, that could look like persecution, that could look like, you know, being the black sheep in your family, that could look like, you know, feeling a really deep calling towards sacred sexuality, or towards sexual healing, but being very afraid that like what that means, and does it mean that, you know, and like that I'm a whore or something like this. So it's like there is you know, it's just important for us to be mindful of our history, so that we can begin to, you know, dismantle those obstacles to our re-empowerment in the divine feminine. And that's something that I do in a course that I teach called the Magdalene Wounds.
Thank you. These are such important points, because so often women think, why can't I just get over myself? And, you know, but like you say, it's these deep karmic wounds that we're holding, and it's a job to get through them and look at them. But when you get help with someone that's been on the path and that has the healing modalities to do it, you're able to transcend them, a lot quicker. And that brings me on to another question, like, how is it possible to serve others when we're healing ourselves? And specifically, how specifically is the wounded healer archetype connected to the mysticism of the Divine Mother?
Yeah, I think this is such a great question. It's probably one of my favorite to talk about. So what you were saying before, where, you know, it's important for us to have, you know, somebody else that has gone through it that can then maybe support us. You know, a lot of the wisdom of creation is the wisdom of experience. You know, it's one thing to kind of receive a teaching or, you know, a transmission of energy. It's another thing to live it. And when we live something, it becomes almost like fundamentally realized or woven. Tantra is weaving. It becomes fundamentally woven into the fabric of our being. And a lot of times what I see in relation to the idea of service to others, the idea of helping and healing or teaching or guiding, is from more of the divine masculine perspective, or from more of the patriarchal perspective. There's kind of this idea that God is perfect and that the leader has to be perfect, and that the teacher has to be perfect. And you know, a lot of us will sort of like postpone our own service to others because we say, hey, well, I need to be perfect before I can help, or before I can heal, or before I can serve another. When in fact, the goddess works totally differently in that regard. And, you know, I probably really realized this principle first. I spent 5 years in the 12-step world in recovery after my very destructive adolescence and teenage years. I needed some recovery. And there was something that they used to say in the world of alcoholism and addiction, which is that, you know, before AA was created by, you know, Bill Wilson and Dr. Bob, who kind of had a mystical experience together where they had gone to all kinds of sanitariums and doctors and religious groups trying to heal this disease of addiction, and nobody could help them. With like all these outer forms of authority trying to be like, let me come in and fix you, it wouldn't work. And they realized together that they could heal each other. And there was something about the fact of a shared experience and talking with someone that really understood what you had experienced and understood it very, very deeply, because they were suffering from it too. And when you came together, so the Divine Mother is all about relationship and intimacy and connection. And our wounds, in essence, can create very deep bonds. They can create love if we are honest, and if we are able to be vulnerable, and if we are able to open up and to share about that with another human soul. that is how she heals. That is how her power works. She's not about the perfection. She's like, hey, I know you're here. I know you're in the creation. It's impossible to be perfect here. It's literally impossible. This is duality. There's going to be suffering. There's going to be pains. There's going to be problems. And nobody is perfect. You're not meant to be. But what you are meant to be is you are meant to be like a child in relation to your imperfection, in relation to your vulnerability, and let me love you through it. And this is how you really experience the love and the humility and the care and the connectiveness of life and creation itself. And so I would say the wounded healer is almost like the archetype of like the Divine Mother's agent of how she heals. And you know, so many of us have to, like, even when I use that word, I just like feel like this subconscious like judgment towards it, you know, like, oh, I don't want to be the wounded healer. I want to be I want to be the perfected one. I want to, you know, I don't want to be so vulnerable. But if we can start to create, and this is where like kind of all the mysticism of sacred relationships starts to come back in, if we can start to create safe spaces for ourselves to be honest with each other about our pains and about our struggles, if we start to learn, you know, the communication techniques that really support us, you know, releasing those pains, being witnessed in them, having compassion offered to them, you know, there is a very deep empathy and there's a very deep current. It's almost like its own little healing power that comes in, and that's actually what alchemizes the wound into beauty, into something very profound. And so you absolutely don't need to be healed or don't need to be perfect to be like a servant of humanity or a servant of others. That's very much an idea that comes from a more patriarchal understanding. As long as you can be honest, and as long as you can be vulnerable, and as long as you could be sincere in your devotion to healing or to finding a solution and to helping others who are also, you know, in that struggle with you, and working together with them. You know, when it comes to a lot of these wounds, especially with sexual health and women, there is something about women's sexuality which is so interesting, and it's like, it's unique because I don't think men have the same thing, but like our hormones and stuff, when we are with other women, like our cycles sync, our oxytocin increases. And so there's like this wisdom in the female body, and especially when if you are going through health challenges or fertility challenges, or you're going into childbirth and you're scared, you know, all these things, like you actually need other sisters, the doula, there with you, or like there's part of our body's intelligence where we actually need the community, we need the connection with the other women. And so that is more of this divine feminine path of healing, is that through that connection, you don't need to be perfect. We bring it into communication, we bring it into empathetic fields of connectivity and witnessing, and like that's really truly, you know, what it what it means. And so I say that because if you are like an agent of the divine feminine, you might have a lot of shit. You might be like, man, I should not be helping anyone.
I'm just hiding, yeah.
You might really feel unworthy of it. And that's okay. You know, like that's okay. Like that's how it's meant to be, as long as you allow that to become a method of reaching out and connecting and getting the help you need and then passing that forward. You know, that's sort of how the healing in the Divine Mother works.
I can just really feel how that is the medicine for this distorted patriarchal world that we live in, where it's me, myself, and I in my ivory tower, teaching you, smalling, little people, my perfection, and seeing at what that sees it that there isn't perfection in the divine, and what you've described, this empathetic compassion co-creation, is what would birth a new earth actually through that way. Actually, these types of leaders standing up.
Yeah, we're really in, like, I mean, right now we're in this like really interesting little crucible, because on one level, since 2020 and the pandemic, I have seen such an amazing kind of opening into all of these collective fields of awareness. It's like, I like to say this, it's like what happens in China does not stay in China anymore. You know, like if it's happening somewhere, it's affecting all of us. So we've actually kind of like opened into this unity, one family planet type of energy, which is super unique. I mean, even with the world wars and stuff, there was still like a lot more disconnection and fragmentation. I'm sure there were parts of the world where they didn't even know a world war was going on. And with this pandemic, like everybody knew and everybody was affected by it wherever you lived on the planet. And so we have begun, you know, to realize this need for honoring our relativity, honoring the interconnectedness of everything. And yet, like, it's brought all these wounds up to the surface, these deep shadows that some of them are old, you know, like been here for a long time, you know, racism, slavery, you know, like all of these different like political, you know, beliefs and ideologies that are at war with each other. And I'm seeing still like the method, like it's like there's been this grace actually in the opening of that collective field, but then like the method that everybody is still trying to use to heal it is kind of like, I'm going up onto my platform and I know the right way and I'm gonna shout my viewpoint, and then someone else is rising up and shouting theirs, and it's just creating this chaos. And I'm like, really, when we shift and where instead of each of us standing up and being like, this is what's wrong in the world, and I know this solution, when we shift into like, here is the pain point or the problem in me, and like asking for the like the connection and the witnessing and the like humbly asking for the healing. Like when we all kind of, I think it's gonna, I don't know how it will come forward. It need to be like a really deep shift, but where we all realize that it's not outside of us, that we're all sort of addicted to this way of life that is toxic, you know, and that is going to create like a global, and is creating a global crisis. We're all going to have to come forward and be vulnerable to that wound in ourselves, you know. And I right now, just the way we're programmed culturally with, you know, a dominated conquest kind of like all power type of model of nation states, it's going to be really hard to break through that. This is where women,
we need priestesses.
Yeah, this is where we come in. This is where your stomach comes in, because I believe that women have that power. You've seen it happen, like I can't remember the country where there was a war going on and all the women came together and did like a sex strike until the war ended. But like, women have a lot of power. If we activated it, we could really truly bring like this nurturing grace through. And so that's part of my mission, and I'm sure it's also part of yours with this summit.
Yeah, oh, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. It's really interesting actually to hear you talk. Is there anything else that you would like to share where I haven't asked a question?
You know, I feel really complete as far as the questions go. I would just say that yeah, no, I mean, nothing's coming through. I wish there was something there, but it's not.
It's complete. We just still. Thank you.
The silence. We'll be in the silence.
Maybe that's what it needs to be for this information that you've shared to hit people on different levels and go, okay, stepping into their priestess path and really honoring their sacredness and the sacredness of life and all creation. Thank you so much, Akara. As I said, you can find out more information about Akara on wakingbeauty.com. She also has a beautiful gift, which is sexual yoga. So I'm going to be sharing the link to that. And if you have any questions, please pop questions as you're watching this symposium, and I'll try and field them through and get all of them answered.
And could I just say one thing about the sexual yoga? So this is going to be a class on Beltane, which is a traditional sort of day of the fertility goddess or the fertility path. So we'll just be diving into some of the mysteries of sacred sexuality for healing yourself and extending life force and cultivating deeper intimacy and love in relationship. And it will be held on a day that is more of a ceremonial day in honor of the fertility goddess. So it's coming up.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for that. Okay, thank you so much, Akara.
It's such a pleasure, Kelly. It was an honor to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Oh, that was so beautiful to watch back. So I really want to open up for questions now. So whether you're watching on Zoom, if you're watching in Facebook, if you're watching the replay, please pop your questions in the chat box and we will be sure to be coming back to you. I'm just going to check some comments now. Oh, Jordan's talked about a book called Womb Awakening. Yes, I'm aware of this book as well. It's a really big, thick book, and it has some great themes in there. So thank you for sharing that. Megan, this has touched me so deeply, profound. What advice on getting first services out there as you discussed with no doubts? That's a really good question. Well, I'll answer and then I will field this as well. My feeling is that when it comes from within, so when it comes from that deep inner essence within, it is a gift of the gods. It is a gift of the god, the goddess that has come through you. And so when we recognize that what our services are that we're getting out there are coming through us as a gift from the god and the goddess, as medicine for the world, it's like our ego can get out of the way, because it's not me, for example, Kelly Morgan, bringing this wisdom, this teaching, this service through. It's me as an emissary of the god goddess that is bringing that through. And almost what I found is that that helps when this inner knowing is, when you've really connected to the inner knowing and it's really strong, it's like this power is coming through you instead of you having to do the hard work to get it out. So that would be my first thing. And then to work on what the shadows are, what the blocks are that are stopping you from getting out there. So fear of speaking out, fear of being persecuted, fear of your own power, and just getting really honest with yourself about what those fears are, about what those blocks are, about what those doubts are that are stopping you from getting out there. And just kind of mothering yourself, nurturing yourself, you know, get into a circle of women. You know, I know, Megan, you've been part of my program. When you're in that circle, you're able to be held and nurtured and loved through this. So don't do it all alone. Don't just do it through hard work. Do it through holding yourself through that process, because it's not easy. If you heard from Maya Luna, you know, she in her talk, which was amazing, she talked about when we speak out, we are going to get haters, we are going to get persecuted, because the divine feminine has been put down for so long. And so it just takes, when you're held, when you can hold yourself and you're held through that, I think it makes it much easier. So I hope that answers your question. I'm just going to check in the group as well to see if there's any questions there. I'm just reading through now so I can answer questions as they come. So Megan says, thank you, bless you. I can't wait to see what you're bringing out, Megan. I can already feel that you are, actually. I've really felt the change in energy of your posts, and I'm really excited to see with what you're going to be bringing out there. Okay, I don't think there's any more questions, just lovely comments about thank you and lots of compassion and talking. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining live. Tomorrow we are live again, and we are live tomorrow at the same time. So that's easy because we've had different times, but tomorrow is the same time. We're going to be hearing from Lenka Lutonska, and she's going to be talking to us about creating limitless income and impact with the power of our personal energy. So tune in tomorrow to watch that. So yeah, we've got a few more talks left. I think we've got that one. Then we have Dr. John D. Martini, which is really one not to miss. That's about the God and Goddess within. And then on Friday, I'm going to be speaking about this restoration of the divine feminine, how to step into your feminine power. And then on Saturday, we have Diana Bewley talking to us about becoming ready for sacred union. And then on Sunday we have a closing ceremony, but we don't just have one, we have two. So I'm doing one in the Australasia time zone, so it'll be in the afternoon for Australasia, and then I'm doing another one which will be kind of morning afternoon time for the USA, because I've realized there's so many people that are watching replays because they're in different time zones. So on Sunday, there's going to be two options. Look in the Facebook group for the invite to that, and I'll also email it out. Sending you many blessings, lots of love. Thank you so much for being part of it, and let me know if you have any questions. Bye.